He had everything a man could want: a large house, expensive cars, and a life filled with comfort. People called him a successful businessman, someone who seemed untouchable in his world. But when it came to his son, money and status didn't matter. His son was blind, and he had always worried about him. The boy had grown up in a world full of sounds, smells, and feelings, but he had never seen the faces around him, never noticed the colors or the sunlight that streamed into the windows. The father's worry was not about money. It was about the boy's happiness, about how he would face the world, and whether he could ever find joy in a life that was harder than most. For years, the father had watched his son struggle quietly. The boy learned things slowly, often frustrated when he couldn't do what other children could. But there was one thing that always made the father smile, a tiny sparkle that appeared whenever the boy touched the piano. It was a small upright piano in the corner of the living room. It had been in the family for generations, mostly for decoration. But for his son, it had become a source of magic. Every time he pressed a key, there was a sound that felt alive, as if the piano itself understood him. And over the last few months, the father had noticed something unusual. The boy was getting better. Much better. His fingers moved confidently across the keys. He played tunes that were surprisingly complex for someone who had never had lessons. The melodies were beautiful, emotional, and full of feeling. But there was one problem. The father didn't know how it was happening. He asked the boy casually one evening. "Who taught you this?" The boy looked down at his hands, hesitant, almost embarrassed. I just practice," he said softly, but the father could tell that wasn't the whole truth. He had heard music for years, and he knew the difference between someone who learned on their own and someone who was being guided. The touch, the rhythm, the understanding, it was too perfect to be self-taught. Curiosity began to grow in him, a mix of wonder and concern. He had always been careful about who spent time with his son. The boy was blind, and the world could be cruel. He couldn't allow just anyone near him, teaching him, influencing him. Yet here was his son, secretly improving every day, and no one had told him how or why. It started with small moments. The father would leave his office earlier, pretending he had meetings, just to get home and listen. At first, he simply heard the music floating through the hallways, soft and beautiful. He didn't want to scare the boy, so he stayed hidden. He watched him play, fascinated, noticing the way the boy's face lit up with every note. The music seemed to come from the boy's soul, not just his hands. And every day it got better. The father also began noticing small details. Piano books that weren't there before appeared in the room. Notes scribbled on paper, fingering charts carefully folded, all placed in ways that suggested someone else was helping the boy learn. It was impossible to ignore. Someone was teaching his son, someone who had spent time, patience, and care, but why? And why hadn't they told him? His mind raced with questions. Was it a tutor? A family friend? Someone with good intentions or someone with selfish reasons? The father was proud, of course, but also protective. His son had already faced more challenges than most children, and he didn't want anyone to take advantage of him. The music, however, was undeniable. It was a gift, a secret blossoming in the quiet corners of their home. He decided to investigate slowly. Not in a way that would scare his son, but carefully. He began arriving home at odd times, lingering near the piano. At first, the boy seemed distracted, unaware of the father's presence. He played as if the music was flowing naturally from him. Without thinking, but there was an unusual comfort in the way he moved. Almost as if he had a teacher guiding him from somewhere nearby, the father tried to imagine who could be helping. He thought of musicians he had met through work, friends who might have offered assistance out of kindness, or maybe even a stranger who had been inspired by the boy's determination. But no one had mentioned coming over to teach him. No one had even hinted. The mystery grew deeper with each passing day. One evening, he made a decision. He would follow the sound, not to spy, but to understand. He quietly walked toward the music, listening. It led him to a small, unused room in the back of the house. He peeked inside, expecting perhaps to see a professional teacher or a friend sitting beside his son. Instead, he was greeted by something entirely unexpected. The boy was alone in the room. He played with a skill and grace that made the father's heart skip a beat. The melodies were intricate, precise, and filled with emotion. But there was no one in the room, no teacher, no guide, just the boy and the piano. Confusion struck him. How was this possible? Had the boy truly been learning in secret? Could someone have taught him and left without being noticed? The father stepped closer, careful not to disturb the music. He watched, amazed, as the boy's hands danced across the keys, creating music that could have belonged in a concert hall. He realized that he had been wrong to think someone else was behind this. The boy had something special, something beyond simple talent or teaching. There was determination, there was passion, and most importantly, there was love for the music. The father's heart swelled with pride. But at the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed something important. He should have noticed this talent earlier. He should have been more present. The boy finished the piece and leaned back, breathing heavily, unaware of his father's presence. The room was silent for a moment, filled only with the echoes of the last notes. The father felt a mix of emotions, pride, awe, worry, and a deep, unspoken love. He knew he had to approach this carefully. He didn't want to frighten his son or make him feel like he had done something wrong by keeping his lessons a secret. But he also wanted answers. How had this happened? Who had helped him? Was this truly the boy's own discovery, or was someone guiding him from behind the scenes? The father decided to wait. He would give his son time. He would watch and learn, quietly and slowly understand the truth. For now, he allowed himself to feel the music, letting it fill the spaces of the house, filling the corners of his heart he hadn't realized were empty. That night, he stayed awake long after his son had gone to bed, thinking. He remembered the first day his son had touched the piano, how timidly he had pressed the keys, how uncertain he had been. And now, the transformation was breathtaking. The boy had found his voice, his expression, through the piano. And somewhere, somehow, a secret teacher had played a part, invisible but undeniably present. The father knew that the coming days would bring answers. Someone had been guiding his son, and soon he would find out who. But for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel hope. Hope that his son could achieve greatness. Hope that the world could be full of kindness. And hope that he, as a father, could finally understand the gift that had appeared quietly in his home. And so, the father waited, listening for the next notes, knowing that each one was a step closer to the truth he wasn't yet ready for. The next few days were filled with curiosity and quiet observation. The father could not stop thinking about the piano and his son's incredible skill. Each time he came home, he would pause near the living room or the hallway, just to listen to the music drifting through the house. Every note was like a puzzle, and he felt the urge to understand it, to understand who was behind this sudden mastery. He began noticing small details he had missed before. The room was never completely empty when his son practiced. There were tiny science pencils with erasers neatly chewed, scraps of paper with musical notations, pages from books he didn't remember buying. The father realized that someone had been here, quietly helping his son. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. Someone had cared enough to guide his son's hands and mind without ever asking for anything in return. One evening, the father decided to take a closer look. He wanted to see for himself, but without startling his son. He approached the piano room slowly, the sound of his footsteps muted against the carpet. Inside, he found his son sitting at the piano, fingers gliding across the keys, eyes closed, completely immersed in the music. The father felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. Pride because his son was playing so beautifully. Unease because he still did not know who had been teaching him. He decided to wait, hiding behind the doorframe, listening carefully. He wanted to catch a clue, any sign of the mysterious teacher. But no one appeared. The room was silent except for the music his son created. The father was baffled. Could it be that his son had truly learned all this on his own? He doubted it. The level of skill was far beyond what he had expected, especially for someone who had never formally learned piano. The father left the room without disturbing the boy, his mind spinning. He needed answers, but he knew he had to be careful. He could not force his son to speak, and he could not confront the teacher without knowing who it was. So he decided to observe quietly, to watch the boy's routine and see if he could learn more. Over the next few days, he followed the same pattern. He would arrive home at different times, pretending to be tired or busy, and wait near the piano room. He noticed something else. His son's excitement was growing. He would hum softly while playing, smile occasionally, and sometimes tap his foot in rhythm. The father realized that the lessons whoever was giving them were not just teaching music, they were giving his son confidence, joy, and a sense of accomplishment. Then, one afternoon, the father noticed something unusual. As he approached the piano room, he saw a shadow move across the floor. Someone was there, just out of sight, but the father froze. He had finally seen proof that his son was not learning alone. But who could it be? He strained his ears, listening for any sound. The music continued, gentle but precise, and then he heard a soft voice. "Very good. Try it again, slowly this time." The father's heart skipped a beat. That voice, it was calm, kind, patient. It was not someone he had ever met before. He pressed closer to the door, trying to see without being seen. There, in the corner, was a figure, a person, crouched slightly, guiding his son's hands from a distance, using words, soft encouragement, and small gestures. The father could hardly believe his eyes. Someone had been teaching his son all along, but why had they never revealed themselves? Why in secret? He stayed hidden, watching them work together. The teacher was not flashy or demanding. They did not correct harshly or push too hard. Instead, they seemed to understand the boy's limits and gently encouraged him to reach beyond them. Each note was praised, each mistake was met with patience. The father felt a mix of relief and admiration. Whoever this person was, they cared deeply about his son, and their guidance was shaping him into a confident, talented musician. The father wanted to step in, to ask questions, to thank them, but something held him back. He realized that revealing himself too soon might disrupt this delicate balance. His son had created a safe space, a place where he could grow without pressure. If the father interrupted, he might destroy that. So he stayed silent, observing quietly, letting the lessons continue. Days turned into weeks, and the father became more and more fascinated. He started noticing patterns in the lessons. The teacher would arrive quietly, sometimes leaving notes or small instructions for the boy to follow. They would guide him through exercises, teach him scales and pieces of music, and gradually introduce more complex tunes. The father could see the progress clearly. His son had gone from simple melodies to playing compositions that sounded professional. And yet, the teacher remained invisible, always careful to avoid being noticed. One evening, the father decided to try a different approach. Instead of hiding, he stayed in the room, but made himself invisible by sitting in the corner and pretending to read a book. He wanted to see how the teacher interacted with his son when he was nearby but unnoticed. It was a risk, but he felt it was necessary. The teacher did not notice him, and the lesson continued as usual. The boy played a new piece, and the teacher guided him gently, correcting mistakes and praising improvement. The father was amazed. He realized that this person was not just a teacher, they were a mentor, a friend, and someone who understood his son in a way that he himself sometimes could not. The father also began to notice the emotional connection between his son and the teacher. The boy's face would light up at a compliment. His hands would move more confidently after encouragement, and he would hum softly when the teacher smiled. The father felt a pang of guilt. He had been so focused on protecting his son, on giving him the best life possible, that he had overlooked the importance of human connection. This mysterious teacher had given him something far more valuable than any material gift: confidence, self-expression, and a sense of purpose. As the weeks passed, the father's curiosity grew into determination. He needed to know who this person was and why they were helping his son. He did not want to confront them aggressively, but he wanted answers. He began thinking carefully about how to approach the situation. He knew that revealing himself too soon might frighten the teacher or his son. He had to find the right moment, a way to show respect and gratitude without disrupting the lessons. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. The teacher left a small note on the piano, written in neat, careful handwriting. It said simply, "Practice the scale we worked on today. You are improving so much. See you tomorrow." The father felt a wave of emotion. This person was dedicated, consistent, and patient. They had been helping his son every day without asking for anything in return. They had been shaping his son's future quietly. With love and care, the father realized that the next step would not be to confront them immediately. He had to understand their motives, their story, and why they had chosen to help his son in secret. He had to be patient, just like the teacher had been with his son. And so he continued to observe, to listen, and to learn from a distance. He also began to reflect on his own role as a father. He realized that no amount of money or status could replace time, attention, and emotional support. His son had grown up strong and talented not because of wealth, but because of the quiet dedication of someone who believed in him. The father felt a deep sense of gratitude and also a growing determination to ensure that this teacher was acknowledged, valued, and respected. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between the boy and the teacher grew stronger. The father continued to watch silently, sometimes feeling like an intruder in a private world of music and growth. He understood that this was not just about piano lessons, it was about trust, patience, and human connection. Whoever this teacher was, they had given his son a gift that could not be measured in money. Finally, the father knew that the moment to meet the teacher would come. He could not force it, and he did not want to scare anyone. He only needed to wait for the right time, a moment when trust and respect could be offered without fear. Until then, he would continue to watch, to listen, and to learn, knowing that this mysterious person had already changed his son's life forever. And so, the father waited, filled with admiration, gratitude, and a growing sense of anticipation. He knew that when the truth was revealed, it would be a moment that none of them would ever forget, a moment of discovery, respect, and perhaps even forgiveness. But for now, all he could do was watch as the music continued to flow. Each note a bridge between his son and the invisible teacher who had quietly, patiently, and lovingly guided him to greatness. Weeks had passed, and the father's curiosity had grown into something deeper. He no longer just wanted to watch from a distance. He needed to know who had been guiding his son with such patience, care, and skill. Every day the music filled the house, a beautiful, invisible thread connecting his son to someone he had never met. The father knew it was time to uncover the truth. Though he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, one afternoon he decided to approach the piano room differently. Instead of hiding or just listening, he walked in quietly while his son practiced. The boy was focused, fingers gliding across the keys, completely absorbed in the music. The father stood at the doorway, silent, careful not to startle him. But this time, the unexpected happened. A soft voice called from behind the piano. "Remember, take it slow. Feel each note." The father turned and froze. There, crouched beside the piano, guiding his son's hands with gentle, expert movements, was the teacher. And he was not at all who the father expected. The teacher was not a famous musician, not a wealthy instructor, not someone he had met through his circles. He was an ordinary person with simple clothes, worn shoes, and a quiet presence. Yet the way he moved, the way he spoke, and the way his son responded showed a depth of knowledge and understanding that was extraordinary. The father felt a rush of emotion, surprise, curiosity, admiration, and confusion all at once. Who was this person, and why had they been helping his son in secret? He wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but something in the way the teacher worked made him pause. This was a private, sacred moment, and the boy's focus was delicate. He could not risk interrupting it. Instead, the father stayed in the doorway, watching as the teacher guided his son through a difficult piece. Every note, every pause, every correction was precise, patient, and full of encouragement. The boy's hands moved confidently, his expressions changing with the rhythm, his confidence growing under the quiet mentorship. The father realized that this person was doing more than teaching piano. They were shaping his son's character, building his self-esteem, and giving him a sense of accomplishment that no wealth or privilege could provide. After the lesson, The teacher finally noticed the father. He stood up, straightening his simple shirt, and smiled politely. There was no fear, no arrogance, no hesitation, just calm confidence. "Good afternoon," he said. "I didn't realize anyone else was here." The father stepped into the room, trying to maintain composure. I wanted to see—" "To understand," he said slowly. "You've been teaching my son?" The teacher nodded quietly. "Yes, he has a natural gift, but he needed guidance. I only wanted to help him grow." The father felt a mixture of admiration and disbelief. You've done all of this without asking for anything? Without telling me?" "Yes," the teacher replied simply. "It was never about recognition or payment. I wanted him to feel the music, to find confidence in himself. That was enough for me." The father's mind was racing. He wanted to know everything: who this person was, why they had chosen to help, how they had acquired such skill. But more than that, he wanted to understand the motivation, the heart behind the actions. "Why?" he asked finally, in a soft, almost trembling voice. "Why did you help him in secret?" The teacher took a deep breath and looked at the boy, who had turned to watch silently. "I promised someone long ago that I would teach a child who needed guidance, who deserved a chance to discover their gift. I've been keeping that promise, quietly, one lesson at a time." The father was stunned. The words carried weight beyond the music. There was a history here, a story he did not yet understand. The teacher was not just a teacher, they were someone with a past, someone shaped by promises, losses, and perhaps regret. The father realized that his son had been lucky to find such a person, someone who could see potential where others saw limitations. He wanted to know more. "Your skills, your understanding, where did it come from?" he asked. The teacher smiled faintly, a little sadly. "Life teaches in many ways. I learned music the hard way, and I made mistakes along the way. But I also learned patience, empathy, and how to inspire someone who feels small or unseen. I wanted to give that to him." The father felt a surge of emotion. He realized that this person, in their quiet and ordinary appearance, carried more wisdom and compassion than many people he had known in his life. And now, that gift was being poured into his son, shaping him into someone confident, skilled, and joyful. He watched as the teacher guided his son through another piece. The boy's hands moved more confidently than ever, and the father noticed a sparkle in his eyes, a joy that he had never seen before. That sparkle, he realized, came not from money or privilege, but from human connection, trust, and encouragement. Finally, the father spoke again, voice soft but steady. "I need to understand everything. Who are you? Why have you done this? And why for my son?" The teacher paused, looking at the father carefully. "I am someone who has lived through mistakes and regret. I once had a chance to be someone important in the music world, but I lost it. I could have focused on myself, but I chose to focus on helping someone else. Your son, he reminded me of what I could have been, what I should have done. Teaching him was my way of making amends for the past, quietly, without seeking recognition." The father's heart ached. He realized that this person had suffered, sacrificed, and yet chosen to help someone else instead of seeking attention or revenge. The depth of that kindness was overwhelming. He felt a mixture of awe, guilt, and gratitude. He had judged the situation in his mind for weeks, wondering who could be teaching his son, and now he understood. The answer was far more extraordinary than he had imagined. He also noticed something else: his son's expression. The boy seemed calm, confident, and proud, aware of the bond he had with the teacher. There was trust, respect, and something deeper, a quiet understanding that this person cared about him not as a task or obligation, but as a human being. The father felt a pang of regret. He had been so focused on control and protection that he had almost overlooked the beauty of human kindness. "Thank you," the father finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to say it properly, but thank you for everything you've done for him, for helping him grow." The teacher shook his head. "No need to thank me. I did what I felt was right. Seeing him smile, seeing him grow, that is enough." The father realized that he had learned something important that day. True greatness, he thought, was not in money, status, or recognition. True greatness was in selfless acts, in guiding someone with care, and in helping them discover their own potential. And this person, ordinary as they seemed, had done more for his son than he could have ever imagined. He decided to take a step he had not expected. Instead of controlling the situation or questioning further, he would trust the teacher, respect the bond they had created, and learn from their example. He would step back, give space, and allow this secret, quiet mentorship to continue. The father also realized that his son's life had changed forever. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge between past mistakes, human kindness, and future possibilities. The music carried lessons of patience, trust, and love. And the teacher, once a stranger, had become a quiet hero in their lives. That evening, as the father watched the teacher leave, he felt a sense of peace. He understood that the story was bigger than music. It was about trust, human connection, and the power of selfless guidance. He knew that when the time was right, he would learn even more about the teacher's past, their sacrifices, and the journey that had brought them to this moment. For now, he allowed himself to simply watch, listen, and admire. His son played with confidence, skill, and joy. And the father knew that the invisible thread connecting them to this extraordinary teacher had created something far more valuable than he could have imagined. And so, the father waited, filled with awe, respect, and anticipation. He knew the coming days would reveal more of the teacher's story, a story of pain, redemption, and the quiet power of human kindness. But for now, he simply listened to the music, feeling grateful that his son had found a guide, a mentor, and someone who could see the potential that others had overlooked. The days after the father had discovered the teacher's identity were filled with a mix of admiration and curiosity. He knew that the person who had guided his son was extraordinary, but there was more to uncover. Who was this teacher really? What had brought them here, quietly dedicating themselves to a blind child's growth? The father felt that the answers lay in the teacher's past, and he was determined to learn them not out of judgment, but out of respect. One evening, he decided to stay a little longer after the lesson. His son had finished practicing and was now sitting quietly, humming the tunes he had just played. The teacher was packing away the music sheets and cleaning the piano gently. The father took a deep breath and finally spoke, carefully. "I think it's time you tell me your story. I want to understand why you've done this for my son." The teacher looked up slowly, eyes calm but serious. There was a pause, a moment of hesitation, as if weighing how much to reveal. Then, softly, the story began. "A long time ago, I had a dream. Music was my world, my life. I practiced day and night, hoping to achieve something meaningful. I thought talent alone would bring success, but life had other plans. I faced betrayal, loss, and disappointment. I lost opportunities because of others' greed and my own mistakes. I thought my dream was over." The father listened, leaning against the wall. He could sense the pain in the teacher's voice, the weight of years spent struggling silently. There was no bitterness, no anger, only honesty. "I had to give up," the teacher continued. "I had no money, no reputation, and no one to support me. But I never forgot the lessons music taught me, the patience, the discipline, and the joy it could bring. And I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to help someone who truly deserved it, I would. That promise brought me here." The father's mind raced. He had assumed that anyone capable of teaching his son so well must have had formal training, money, or recognition. But the truth was entirely different. This person had faced hardships, had been denied their own dreams, yet they had chosen to dedicate themselves to someone else's growth. The weight of selflessness struck the father deeply. The teacher looked at the boy, who was listening quietly from his chair, sensing that something serious was being shared. "When I met him," the teacher said softly, "I saw the same determination in his eyes that I once had. I saw someone who needed guidance, someone who could shine if only given the right support. I knew I could help him, even if it meant staying in the background, even if no one would ever know my name." The father felt a lump in his throat. He realized that the music he had heard, the progress his son had made, was not just talent, it was the result of years of dedication, care, and sacrifice from someone who had been invisible until now. "And you did all of this without asking for anything in return?" he asked quietly. The teacher nodded. "I only wanted him to grow. Seeing him smile, hearing him play, knowing that I helped him discover his gift that was more valuable than any reward or recognition. I learned from my own mistakes. I knew what it meant to be overlooked, to have no one believe in you. I wanted him to know that someone did." The father could barely speak. He realized that he had been so focused on his own concerns, control, protection, and curiosity that he had almost missed the bigger picture. This teacher had given his son far more than lessons. They had given him confidence, trust, and hope. They had given him belief in himself. The story continued. "I had been hurt deeply in the past," the teacher said. "There were people who used my talent for their gain, who mocked me when I failed to meet their expectations. I lost everything I worked for, but I never forgot why I started music in the first place, the joy it could bring, the way it could connect people. And when I saw him, I remembered what it felt like to be young, to be eager, and to need guidance." The father's eyes were wet. He had never realized how much courage it must have taken to face one's past, to live through disappointment, and then to dedicate oneself to helping another human being. It was a level of selflessness that was almost unimaginable. You've been carrying this for so long," he said softly. "All the pain, all the loss. And yet you chose to help my son?" "Yes," the teacher replied simply. "Because someone had to believe in him when no one else did. And if I can help him, even in a small way, then my past pain is not wasted. It has a purpose." The father looked at his son, who was now moving closer to the teacher, reaching out and touching his hands gently. The boy had sensed the truth, sensing the depth of care and history in the person who had guided him. There was a quiet understanding between them, a bond formed not just through music, but through trust, respect, and shared growth. The father realized something important in that moment. Life was unpredictable. People faced hardships that were invisible to the world. Yet, despite pain and failure, some chose to lift others up rather than give in to bitterness. This teacher had done exactly that. And in doing so, they had given his son a gift far more important than skill or talent. It was belief in himself, a spark of courage, and the joy of achievement. The teacher's story continued, more personal now. "I could have walked away," they said, "and no one would have known. I could have kept my pain to myself. But I remembered someone who once helped me, who believed in me when I was lost. That kindness inspired me to do the same for someone else. And when I met him, I knew he was the one." The father's heart was heavy with gratitude. He realized that this person, who had seemed ordinary at first glance, had extraordinary strength. They had faced betrayal, loss, and disappointment, yet they had chosen kindness, patience, and mentorship over bitterness. They had taken their pain and turned it into purpose, not for themselves, but for someone else. He stepped closer, feeling the need to acknowledge the courage and sacrifice he had witnessed. "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you," he said. "You've lived through so much, yet you chose to dedicate yourself to my son. I don't know if I can ever truly thank you." The teacher smiled faintly. "The thank you is in seeing him grow, hearing him play, and knowing that he believes in himself. That is enough for me. That is why I continue." The father looked at the boy, who was now smiling widely, his fingers moving over the keys with confidence and joy. He realized that this was more than a lesson in music. It was a lesson in life. The boy was learning not just to play, but to trust, to persevere, and to believe in kindness. He was learning that people could care deeply, even when no one else noticed. The father understood the truth fully now. The teacher's past, filled with pain and missed opportunities, had led them here. And in that journey they had created something beautiful, an invisible, quiet force shaping his son's life. He felt gratitude, respect, and a sense of responsibility. He would not let this dedication go unnoticed. He would honor it, protect it, and ensure that the bond between his son and the teacher remained strong. As the evening faded, The teacher packed up the music sheets and prepared to leave. The father stopped them gently. "Wait," he said. "I want you to know something. You've changed his life, and in doing so you've changed mine. Your story, your choices, I will never forget them." The teacher nodded, eyes calm but touched. "That is all I ask. That is all I ever wanted, to make a difference, quietly and meaningfully." The father watched them leave, and as the door closed behind the teacher, he felt a profound realization. Life was not about money, fame, or power. It was about human connection, trust, and the courage to lift someone else up, even when the world had been unfair to you. The teacher had taught his son much more than music. They had taught him life itself. And in that quiet house, with the piano still echoing with the boy's melody, the father understood that the coming days would be full of change, growth, and discovery. He knew the teacher's past had shaped their actions, and that past, once hidden, had created a future filled with hope, skill, and confidence. For the first time, the father felt a deep, quiet peace. He knew the truth, he knew the story, and he knew the power of human kindness. And as the boy continued to play, filling the room with beautiful music, the father realized that this story was far bigger than any of them had imagined. A story of pain, redemption, mentorship, and the quiet, invisible forces that shape lives forever. The days that followed were filled with a sense of new beginnings. The father, now fully aware of the teacher's story and sacrifices, felt a profound change within himself. He had always thought that his role as a parent was to provide security, wealth, and opportunities. But he had learned something far more important. Sometimes the greatest gift is not money, not protection, and not control, but the presence of someone who believes, guides, and encourages. He watched his son practicing one afternoon, fingers moving confidently across the piano keys. The music was no longer just beautiful, it was powerful, expressive, and alive. He saw the spark in his son's eyes, the joy that came not just from the notes, but from the understanding that someone had faith in him, that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. And the father knew that this transformation had not come from him, not from his wealth or influence, but from the teacher. It was time, he realized, to show respect and gratitude in a way that matched the teacher's selflessness. That evening, he invited the teacher into the study, a quiet, formal space in the house. The boy had been told to continue practicing, and the father had asked him to give them privacy. The teacher arrived, slightly surprised, but calm as always, with a modest demeanor that hid the depth of their character. "Please sit," the father said. "I want to talk to you. I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you've done for my son." The teacher smiled faintly, not used to being thanked so openly. "I have only done what I could. The real success is his." The father shook his head. "No, it is not just his. It is yours too. The patience, the guidance, the care, it has changed his life. And it has changed mine. I see now what true dedication looks like, and I cannot let your efforts go unacknowledged." The teacher looked away for a moment, quietly thoughtful. "I did not seek recognition. I did not seek reward. I only wanted to help him." "I know," the father replied. "But you deserve more than just the satisfaction of a job done well. You deserve to be seen, respected, and valued. And I intend to make sure that happens. Your story is extraordinary, and your choices have shaped a life in ways you may not even realize." For the first time, the teacher allowed a trace of emotion to show. There was a softness in their eyes, a quiet acknowledgement that someone truly understood the sacrifices made, the years of quiet effort, and the resilience required to stay in the background while helping another person grow. The father continued, "I want you to continue teaching him, but I also want you to know that you have my full support. Anything you need, anything at all, I am here. Your work is invaluable, and I want to honor it." The teacher nodded slowly, a subtle smile forming. "Thank you. That means more than I can say. I only hope I can continue to guide him well." The father left the study that evening with a sense of peace he had never felt before. For years he had been concerned about money, security, and appearances. But now he understood that true value lies in human connection, guidance, and the courage to give selflessly. He realized that wealth and status could open doors, but they could not replace the influence of a kind, patient, and selfless mentor. The next day, the father watched a small but significant change in the house. His son played the piano with renewed confidence, and the teacher sat nearby, guiding him gently. But there was something different. The father was no longer hidden, no longer a silent observer. He was present, offering quiet encouragement, watching the bond between his son and the teacher grow stronger. There was trust, respect, and a shared understanding that all three of them were part of something meaningful. He saw his son smile in a way he had never seen before, a smile full of pride, confidence, and the joy of achievement. And he realized that this was more than music. The piano had become a bridge connecting generations, a tool for learning life lessons, and a symbol of the power of kindness, patience, and guidance. The father knew that it was time to take a step further. He arranged for the teacher to have more resources, a quiet space for lessons, access to music books, and time to dedicate to his son without worry or distraction. He also began to involve himself more, not as a controller, but as a supportive observer, allowing the boy to take the lead while ensuring that the mentorship continued without interruption. One afternoon, the father noticed his son practicing a particularly challenging piece. The boy stumbled at first, frustration flickering across his face, but the teacher remained calm, encouraging him softly. "Take it slow. Feel every note. You can do this." The boy tried again, this time with determination, and the melody flowed smoothly. The father felt a swell of pride, not because of the boy's skill alone, but because he saw the growth, patience, and confidence that had been nurtured over months of careful guidance. He realized that this lesson extended far beyond music. It was a lesson in life, perseverance, and trust. Later, the father asked the teacher to share their experiences with him, to provide insight into teaching and mentorship. The teacher agreed, not out of obligation, but out of a shared purpose to help the father understand how to nurture his son's talent while respecting the child's independence and confidence. They spoke for hours, exchanging ideas about learning, discipline, patience, and encouragement. Through these conversations, the father came to understand that mentoring was not about control or authority. It was about listening, observing, and guiding without imposing. It was about seeing potential where others saw limitations, about giving someone the confidence to believe in themselves, and about creating an environment where growth could happen naturally. The father began to apply these lessons not only to his son but also to himself. He spent more time listening, more time observing, and more time supporting without interference. He realized that true parenting, like teaching, was about balance, guiding without controlling, encouraging without pressuring, and trusting the process of growth. The boy, meanwhile, continued to flourish. His skills improved rapidly, but more importantly, his confidence and joy grew. He was no longer hesitant or uncertain. He played with expression, feeling, and creativity. He began to compose small pieces on his own, exploring his own ideas and emotions through music. The father noticed that this creativity and independence were gifts that the teacher had nurtured, quietly but powerfully, without seeking recognition. One evening, as the father watched his son perform a piece he had composed himself, he realized that the teacher's impact had reached far beyond the piano. The child had learned discipline, patience, confidence, and the joy of self-expression. He had learned the value of perseverance and the power of trust. And most importantly, he had learned to believe in himself. The father felt a deep sense of gratitude and humility. He understood that the teacher had given more than lessons. They had given a vision, a guide, and a model for living a life with patience, dedication, and selflessness. And he knew that the best way to honor this gift was not only to support the teacher, but to ensure that the child continued to grow, confident in his abilities and surrounded by people who believed in him. Over time, the father took steps to formalize the arrangement. He provided resources for lessons, allowed more time for practice, and even connected the teacher with professional networks so that the boy could explore opportunities for growth. But at the heart of it all, the teacher remained central, a quiet, guiding presence who had transformed a child's life without ever seeking attention or reward. The story culminated in a small, private recital at the father's home. The boy performed with skill, confidence, and emotion, and the father watched with pride and awe. The teacher sat nearby, smiling quietly, knowing that the months of dedication, patience, and guidance had created a lasting impact. It was not about applause or recognition, it was about transformation, growth, and the power of human kindness. At the end of the recital, the father spoke to both his son and the teacher. "What you've created together is extraordinary," he said. "It is a testament to patience, trust, and love. You've taught me more than I can express, and I will always be grateful." The teacher nodded humbly, and the boy smiled brightly, understanding that this moment was not only a celebration of music, but also of growth, mentorship, and connection. In the days that followed, life returned to its quiet rhythm, but nothing was ever the same. The boy continued to grow as a musician and as a confident young person. The father continued to learn from both his son and the teacher, embracing the lessons of patience, support, and selflessness. And the teacher continued their quiet work, knowing that they had fulfilled a promise, healed a part of their own past, and created a lasting impact that would shape lives forever. The house, once filled with silent worry and uncertainty, was now filled with music, laughter, and the quiet satisfaction of lives touched and transformed. And in the hearts of all three, the father, the son, and the teacher, there was a deep understanding that true wealth is not measured in money or status, but in the lives we touch, the guidance we offer, and the courage to act with kindness even when no one is watching.